I'm joined now by Christine Hong. She's an Associate Professor of Critical Race and Ethnic Studies at the University of California. Thank you very much for your time, Christine. Now, why is the teaching of AAPI history in schools so important in your view?
I don't understand why anyone would have anything against it, and particularly in the way that it is being presented, in the places that you mentioned, New Jersey and Illinois. You could argue that the histories that are highlighted in those curricula are part of what broadly has to be understood as U.S. history, and oftentimes the underside of those histories. Now, I think what those curricula do not focus on, but rightly should come up through an AAPI curricular framework, is the history of U.S. wars, and its militarized policies in Asia and the Pacific, both, in the past and stretching to the present day. Part of one of your news stories was about Joe Biden recently finishing his grand tour of Asia, and that tour very much rests upon a Cold War militarized infrastructure that has never gone away.
Is it then perhaps possible that AAPI could be a part of what critical race theory wants to teach as well? Why is it that it needs to be a separate curriculum?
I don't know that it has to be a separate curriculum, but I really hate to even accede to the term critical race theory, because critical race theory, in my view, is a manufactured debate. And indeed, if you even read the interviews of the president of the Manhattan Institute, his name is Ayhan with the New York Times columnist J. Caspian Kung, he reveals that this, CRT was used by this free market organization to try to drive different communities of color apart. So it's a wedge politics. And it's the Manhattan Institute that has downloadable forms that instruct parents in in the Midwest, in different parts of the United States, to go to their local school boards and protest. So it's utterly manufactured. So, I hate to even accede to the term CRT. It's not that CRT doesn't exist. It certainly does. As your report indicated, it goes back 40 years, and it begins in the first instance as a narrowly legal field. And so it's certainly not the case that in most K through 12 classrooms throughout the United States that there is a serious analysis of, for example, U.S. Supreme Court case law.
Let's just quickly, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. I just wanted to get a quick question in before we end the interview, because for an international audience, it's quite a difficult concept to explain. And given the fact that there is a conservative movement against CRT in particular, saying that it's woke, that it's a form of discrimination in itself, can you explain why there are so many hurdles culturally in the US? Why is CRT and potentially AAPI history such a big problem for many Americans?
I think that I don't know that AAPI curricula are necessarily a big problem, especially if that curriculum is presented in a historically neutralized way. I think that once you understand that Asia and the Pacific were key sites of U.S. hot war militarized policy throughout the Cold War, and indeed past the Cold War, then you're getting into, I think, tricky territory in terms of what I think a lot of people in the United States would accept. In terms of CRT, why that is so contentious, basically CRT examines law and how U.S. law has racialized different populations of peoples. That extends in the 1990s over to education, where there's an examination of U.S. educational structures also, contributing to the racialization of different populations. And I think that there's just an aversion to thinking through racism structurally and to understand that structures play a role in all of that.
Really interesting to hear your insight. Thank you very much, Christine. Christine Hong there from the University of California.